Section 27 of Music by Ursula Creighton. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. Appendix: Form in Music. Form in music means the symmetry which occurs in some musical works and gives balance to the work, or any other means by which the work is unified. For instance, one of the simplest symmetrical shapes or forms in music is called rondo form. It comes from an old dance where a certain part of the dance is repeated at regular intervals to the same tune, and in between come parts of the dance to different contrasting melodies. The shortest example of this form, and one in which many songs are written, is to have the tune once, then the contrasting music, then the first tune repeated. An example of this can be heard in the air to "The Bluebells of Scotland." Here the first tune accompanies the first line, it is repeated for the second line of the verse, the contrasting music accompanies the third line, and the first tune returns again for the fourth line. A longer example of this form can be seen in the last movement of Beethoven's pianoforte sonata called the Waldstein. Here the long, beautiful melody occurs several times and has different contrasting music between each repetition. Symmetrical form of more complicated structure is naturally found most fully developed in music for instruments alone, in what is sometimes called symphonic, sometimes absolute music. Such music is accompanied by no words or acting and depends on the power of the sound to convey structure, balance, and unity. The most developed form of this kind is sonata form. The form does not affect the meaning of the piece or movement. Different pieces in sonata form express entirely different feelings. Their likeness only consists in their using certain accepted contrasts in the melodies employed, and their employing similar balanced repetitions of these melodies. It is as if the composer accepted a certain exterior ideal, a recognized structure, as well as the personal ideal of expressing what he wished to express. Even so, composers who did write in accepted sonata form all made differences and variations in that form according to their need of expression, but in certain elements the form is clear. In sonata form, there is a first subject or melody in the accepted key of the piece. This is followed by a contrasting subject or melody, either one or several, in a different, contrasting key. After this comes a part sometimes quite different from the subjects, but where sometimes parts of both first and second subjects occur, usually in different keys and showing these parts of the subjects in new light and with new meanings. Then occurs the repetition of the subjects, this time usually both in the original key and certainly ending in the original key in which the piece started. One of the most simple examples of this form is the first movement of Beethoven's pianoforte sonata in G major, Opus 14, number 2. Here there is a clear subject in G major, a long second subject in D major, ending at a double bar, then a long part of the movement where parts of the two subjects are easily recognized, and at last both subjects repeated in G major. Another well-known form is fugue. This form varies very much in length and in the way the subject or principal melody is used, but it is all based on one theme or subject, except in the rare cases of double or triple fugues where 2 or 3 subjects are used. And all fugues begin alike, that is, the subject or melody is given alone by one voice or part, and then by each voice in turn. After that, the same subject occurs often throughout the fugue, in different keys and in different voices or parts, high or low. And now and then, between the repetitions of the subject, come passages of contrasting melody called episodes. It is a wonderful form for personal expression. Pieces in this form from the hands of lesser composers are simply dry and uninteresting. Only the greatest composers have shown the power to choose such a subject or melody for a fugue that they can reveal from that one subject constantly varied and heightened beauties, so that starting with a single voice, they gradually pile up from the one melody such a wealth of meaning that the whole work reveals a unity and a sense of increasing beauty and meaning to the final climax. A wonderful example of this can be seen in the fugue, which forms the last movement of Beethoven's pianoforte sonata in A flat, opus 110. Here the subject starts alone, stealing in, as it were, from a distance, with a feeling of certainty and unrevealed beauty. The repeated entries rise to a climax at last. Then, after a long contrasting music like a voice in broken phrases, the subject comes back inverted, as it is called, or as we might say, upside down, rising where before it fell, and vice versa. Here it expresses a new beauty, a tenderness and poignancy unknown in its original form. And at last the first form of the subject is used again. Parts of it are repeated with heightened intensity to the climax of the whole movement in the last few bars. Other kinds of form are the air with variations and the short dance forms such as the minuet and trio. A minuet and trio is two short dances, really both minuets, played one after the other and then the first repeated. The shape or form of each of these little dances usually depends on a balance of keys. The minuet starts in a given key, and about halfway through the piece, it moves to a contrasting key. The second part then starts in the contrasting key and moves back to the original key and ends in that. This short form usually occurs in each of the minuets. An air and variations is a very simple form when the variations are thinly disguised versions of the air. But in some of the great works written in this form, the variations are, as it were, poetic unfoldings of the theme. The theme in such variations is not clearly recognized, and in fact is often not there, but each variation is like a contrast and a piece of added beauty or interest to the variation before, until the whole becomes a long work made of the separate pieces, each expressing a meaning and feeling of its own, and culminating in the final variation or separate short piece at the end, which sums up the whole. Such are the Études symphoniques of Schumann, the C major variations of Beethoven, the Goldberg variations of Bach, and the Paganini variations of Brahms. It would be impossible to sum up the many variations that occur in any one of these now well-known forms. Sonata form was still so new in the time of Mozart that it is clearly emphasized in much that he wrote. But when Beethoven wrote works in this form, it was with completely different effect. It was as if to him the meaning of every note and passage mattered so much that there was certainly no emphasis on the exterior ideal of form. Rather, the usually accepted structure was altered constantly, lengthened and changed to fit the substance and flow of what he had to say. The balance and unity of his works were attained in more varied ways. The classical feeling for form, for definite shapes such as sonata form, was strong in Haydn and Mozart, and still found adherents in Schumann and Brahms. But later composers have written much music which does not depend on such kinds of formal perfection. It attains its balance and unity by a less fixed use of the themes employed and by more varied means. The contrapuntal use of themes has a special power of giving unity and holding long works together. It has been wonderfully developed in a particular manner by Wagner and other later composers, and has an inexhaustible power of development in new ways. End of section 27. End of Music by Ursula Creighton. Read by Martha Weller, Champaign, Illinois, March 30th, 2024.